Welcome to Sivako, the Avatar podcast. Joining me today on this special episode, I have a very special guest. Special guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey. My name is Matthew, and thanks for having me on here.
It's a pleasure. So, Matthew, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the sort of film podcast sphere?
Well, I'm glad you asked. First off, I've received my associate's degree in theater along with a Bachelor of Science from Stevenson University in film and moving image. However, during the pandemic, when all of our us students weren't able to go to the Stevenson University campus and had to do a remote learning for the rest of the semester. I ended up meeting a couple of friends online, eventually down the road by the name of Nico and Zeddy from Chicago, and because of them, I was able to get on to a couple of their former shows that they have, um, and from there, I just was able to branch out through social media platforms and Twitter, and ended up on various podcasts like the 300 Passions podcast. I recently was on an episode for True Romance. I also worked with Juan Carlos Ollano with the 1 Inch Barrier. If you guys haven't checked that podcast out, check it out. But yeah, just a bunch of other stuffs. But most frequently, I have been a guest podcaster on David's show, Real Talks. And the last couple ones we've been doing were like spoiler podcasts for films like Fast 10 and Across the Spider Verse. And can't wait to do more of these.
Very exciting, and it's a pleasure to have you on. Honestly, I'm super excited, and well, I say excited. The topic today is not the happiest of topics, but we'll get into that shortly. Before we do, I want to ask you a couple little Avatar questions. The first of which is, when did you first see Avatar?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I remembered seeing the trailer. I don't know how when it was or where it was I first saw the trailer, but when I'd first seen the teaser for the very first Avatar film, I remembered thinking to myself, "Wow, this is a weird adaptation of The Last Airbender." I None of this feels like 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 they're adapting the show at all. I don't even know who's in this or what the story is about. But yeah, so flash forward to like December 2009, I saw it in 3D. I remembered having a really crappy theater experience because the projector kept breaking and to the point where they couldn't show the trailers. They just said, "Screw it, we're just gonna jump right into the movie. Sorry to waste your time, guys. We're just gonna go right into it." And then it broke again in that the audio for it started bugging out, and right as they're giving the whole was it unobtainium
Hmm.
exposition with Giovanni Ribisi is talking to Sigourney Weaver in his office. That whole audio was cut out, so we couldn't hear any of that piece. But then it came back on, and then afterwards, all the managers and workers were outside of the theater. Excuse me. And they gave us like these free tickets. Be like, "Oh, sorry for the inconvenience. Here's your free tickets. Come back and see a movie on us or whatever." And then a couple months later, they turned it into, which was a Cinemark I went to, by the way. They turned it into a Cinemark XD auditorium, which is the equivalent of like an IMAX theater. I'm not sure if you guys have that in your area, Sean.
Yeah, we got the IMAX, but XD's like I think might be quite America specific.
Oh, okay. All right. But at least you're aware of what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hadn't seen the first one all the way through maybe since middle school because I rewatched it in class, I think, in like chunks of it or whatever. And then I held off on watching it again as soon as we got the trailer for Avatar: The Way of Water. And I immediately thought of 2 things. 1, there's no way anything's gonna beat this for the visual effects Oscar, that upcoming year. There was nothing else coming out that was gonna beat it, like, nothing. There was no Dune, no Star Wars, nothing. And so, yeah, I was pretty much I even called Nico and Zeddy and I said, "Guys, Avatar's gonna win visual effects. We can just cross that off. Alright, what's the next category we can predict it, like, months in advance or whatever?" 'Cause I also failed to mention that I'm also an Oscar predictor as well. And the other thing too is I thought to myself, you know what? I think now it's time that I show my grandma Avatar because it's been a while since she's seen the movie. So I ended up watching it like 3 different times, prior to the new one. I saw it first in the theatrical cut form at home. We have a really nice TV in, the entertainment room, where I live, and then I watched it again in its, like, 3D re-release, which was amazing, and I'll circle around back to that, down the road as we talk about Avatar films. And then I showed my brother the extended cut, which neither of us had never seen. It's not the special edition; it's like the 3-hour cut that's included on like the big bundle that they have, which I would highly recommend for anyone out there who's interested in knowing more about how James Cameron makes films, and or even if you're just interested in learning what it took for the visual effects artists themselves to create the technology, to create the worlds and the concept art, and bring it to life. And I was going through some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it was really interesting, regardless. And yeah, and then like I said, I'd seen the second film in 3D twice, by the way. So I saw it first on opening day, and then again I saw it like a week later, I think, and I showed it to my brother, and it was a really fun experience overall. And I'm glad that I was able to take take that journey to Pandora once again, so to speak.
It's cool to hear like people getting like back into it for this is the way I got back into Avatar as well, was because of that trailer releasing for The Way of
Yeah.
Water, and just immediately being like, man, I need to watch it again.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that I'm pretty sure you've already talked about this when you were going through your retrospectives on earlier James Cameron films, but say what you want about, his shitty dialogue writing, in my opinion, and some people may call him like, oh yeah, he's got a big ego going against him. But I remember when I rewatched the movie again in 3D, because when I saw it at home with my grandma last year, I was like, yeah, I respect the film a lot. I think there's a lot of technical improvements here. I could see why it was hailed as like one of the best technologically made films and what pushed the boundaries for what was possible for CG. But when you see it in 3D and in theaters, it really blew my mind as to like, okay, all right, Cameron really does deserve the sort of like ego that he has around him, like a little bit, in terms of like the guy really is, he's not talking the talk, he's doing the walk as well. And I always value his voice as a filmmaker, even in other films, because I personally, Sean, I'm not the biggest fan of the Avatar films. I think they're fine or they're entertaining, but they're not ones where I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait to revisit the world of Pandora again, like I would like the Star Wars franchise, or, any other science fiction world I could think of, like Dune, for example. But at the same time, I always value his voice as a filmmaker. And even when you look through his other films, because I much prefer his earlier films, like Terminator 2 is like one of my favorite action films of all time. I love Titanic. And even True Lies, I think, is a pretty fun, spy caper kind of movie. And yeah, and Cameron's just a really solid director, and he just knows how to create tension. He knows how to create escalation and tension building within those action set pieces. And I want to give a quick shout out to, while I'm at it, to Sophia, which as of this recording, I believe is her birthday. Sophia from Oscar Wilde. Uh, she had mentioned in her letterbox review, and I'd always keep coming back to her, to what she said about Avatar: The Way of Water, in that she said, "quote Cameron really knows how to direct action scenes, and the third act truly puts every Marvel film to shame." And it kinda does, actually, because I was even rewatching Avatar: The Way of Water again, about a week or so ago, and I finally showed it to my grandma upstairs in the big screen room, in the entertainment room, and it really does make me go like, "Wow," like, it's not just Cameron throwing a bunch, Cameron and the executives at 20th Century Studios and Disney throwing a bunch of money at a big budget movie and that's it. They put the time and effort into making this technology look amazing. Like the waterwork effects are astounding, and even the facial, voice. Was it performance capture, as John Landau would say, the producer on the film. It really is outstanding and stunning. Even the when I first saw it the second film on my first viewing, I was blown away that Spider is essentially interacting with the Navi characters, to where I couldn't tell that he was on a green screen or a blue screen or whatever projection that they had there. And then I watched the behind the scenes stuff, and it apparently I was told, through these, like, videos and featurettes I saw, that they shot him in, like, a live action, as he was in his human form, and then, put the actor again in a motion capture suit to sort of blend the 2 together within their environments, and I'm like, "Okay, Cameron, you know what? You win. You you clearly know what you're doing as a visual effects artist, a director pushing the visual effects industry forward, and I could never go there as someone who wants to be a filmmaker myself. I could never go there ever, because it's just so much steps that I have to get there, and I'm not even there yet, you know? I mean, hell, the short films I worked on, I don't think we worked on any sort of, like, major special effects at all. It was, very minor stuff, and most of that was done practically on set, so, yeah, but no, I give props to Cameron.
That's it. I think despite, anyone's personal feelings towards the Avatar films, they can't deny that he is like putting that vision into full effect in every possible way he wants to. And not a lot of filmmakers get that opportunity nowadays. And I'm so glad someone like him still does. Especially when you hear like people like, Scorsese or Del Toro or Spielberg sometimes struggle to get a movie made at all,
Yeah.
and like a huge passion project for this. That should be like an automatic, like, yes, we will give you whatever you want. Here, make it. But Cameron's like the only person who gets to do that nowadays.
Yeah, and the other thing that helps too is that Cameron, I think what helps with him is that he has at least like what, 3 movies at least that have made like a billion or $2 billion. So maybe that could be why. Also he's only worked with excuse me, was it 20th Century Studios and Disney for the last like well, ever since he started the second film actually. And yeah, and then, and then you're right. Yeah, it sucks when you get these like great auteurs and, filmmakers like Scorsese and Del Toro, and then we get something as shitty as like Jurassic World, to where it's like, "Oh, we get to, we're going to greenlight that, and the effects won't be nearly as good as when they did the first Jurassic Park film." Cuz all we're going to do is just throw a bunch of money at these like, summer blockbuster tent poles. Doesn't matter what the film looks like, even if it looks like the shittiest, like the Flash movie, for example, whatever, and it'll still make billions of dollars. Who cares? And it's like, come on, guys, I'm really sick and tired of you just doing this. Like that's part of the reason why I stopped watching the Transformers films. And, I mean, there was other things that why I don't watch those films anymore, but even something like Fast and Furious, it's like, I love how ridiculous those films get, but even the last one, I must admit, of like, you guys don't need a budget of $340 million when the effects already look like shit. Like, what else is there that you need the film to be like that big of a budget? I know you switch directors in between production, but still, come on.
Yeah. I think it's a huge thing about like where does the budget go on some of these movies. At least with Avatar, you're like, okay, yeah, I see every single dollar on the screen.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to God that the visual effects artists on these Avatar films were paid properly, because if anyone out there who hasn't seen the documentary Life After Pi, I would highly recommend you check that out after the episode, of course. And we're in a sad state of where visual effects artists are being given little pay. They're not being treated well by Hollywood, even though they rely on these visual effects houses and companies to get their films going, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DC stuff, Netflix. I already mentioned Fast and Furious, Transformers. Like they need these kind of like, visual effects houses to make it work. That's why I was so angry when the Sonic trailer came out like light years ago or whatever, and they had that god awful uncanny valley look to their character,
With the
to the
human
Sonic
teeth.
character. Yeah, with the human teeth, and then and then they're and the studio's like, yeah, we totally agree with this design, we want this for our project, and it's like, no, fuck you. Like, you clearly have no idea. You thought to yourselves that, oh, if we could just, if we just put the title of the game on our properties or whatever, or just, whatever source material we have, and there's a huge fan base for it, it's like, oh, they'll easily go out and see it, and people weren't going to do it until they did the whole change up, and that caused the whole VFX shutdown. I think it was like a Canadian VFX house that went under, and I'm like, you assholes, like, you should have done this to begin with. It's like, you should have said to yourself, no. we're not even gonna do that original design. Fuck that. We're doing something else. We're gonna go much closer to what the game was and what it should have been." So, yeah.
It's an absolutely like crazy thing. And you know what? That sort of leads us nicely into our topic of today in a way, because originally we were about to have a face off of the blue people next year. We were going to have Avatar 3 versus Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in December 2024. But sadly, we have had the sad announcement that Avatar 3, 4, and 5 have been pushed back.
Yeah.
Um, the original post that popped up that I saw was from John Landau, but there was a few, an article from Variety to explain a bit more. But Landau's post said each Avatar film is an exciting but epic undertaking that takes time to bring to the quality level we as filmmakers strive for and audiences have come to expect. The team is hard at work and can't wait to bring audiences back to Pandora in December 2025. And I was on holiday at the time when this news dropped, and it was the last day of my holiday, and I was extremely sad about it. What a downer to suddenly
Yeah.
hear I've got to wait an extra year. Um, so first of all, how are you feeling about the delays to Avatar 3, 4, and 5?
I'm actually okay with it. I'm a bit optimistic. I can't remember where I was. I might have been in Atlantic City when the news dropped because I was on my phone at the beach and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. They're they showed a production still. All right, cool. Maybe we're a lot closer than we thought." And then everyone's in the comments like, "No, fuck no. Why they delayed it?" I'm like, "Oh, they delayed it. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. I trust Cameron. He wants to delay this for a couple more years to, make sure that they have the technology right. And, I'm kind I one of my theories as to why, besides the whole writer's strike going on and, everything could possibly be pushed back to another year, like there's a possible rumor going around that some of the other films that we might get next summer, like Mission Impossible and some of these other films might get pushed another year. Um, we'll see. I can't really speak on behalf of that, but for something like Avatar, I don't think we need to be like worried about them being delayed or anything. I just think again, I just think it if anything, it gives Cameron and his team a little bit more breathing room. Not that there's a lot in there to begin with, but it gives them a little bit of breathing room to sort of relax and sort of make sure the visual effects work is perfect. And again, it doesn't have this like uncanny valley bullshit, you know, going on nowadays in most Hollywood films, like the Marvel films are now in now and all these other stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not as bummed out as a lot of people are.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well. Obviously, so the first one, Avatar 3, has been delayed for a year. Avatar 4 has now been pushed back to 2029, which means there's a 4 year gap between 3 and 4 in terms of releases. And then Avatar 5 is scheduled for 2031, which is the first movie to be announced for the 2030s.
Oh
Uh,
jeez.
so, how old are you going to be, Matthew, by the time we finish Avatars?
Let me pull up my pocket calculator here. 2031, 1997. I'll be 34 roughly.
Oh, nice. I'm going to be
Yeah.
39. So,
Oh
uh,
man.
it's a
It,
weird. It's weird to think
it
that far ahead, if anything.
it it's a shame my grandma won't be around by then.
Oh,
Um,
that's rough, isn't it? To think, oh
yeah,
yeah,
cause yeah, she just turned 81 the other day.
to get off of a very morbid side of things. Um, I feel like, as you said, I think despite these it being sad, and I've now got another year to wait for the next one. I think overall it is a positive thing because yeah, a film like this needs more time for those visual effects. And if it means, the people working on this are working at a reasonable pace instead of like a stupidly quick pace, it means we're not going to miss, small details are not going to be missed out. It means probably the whole thing will have such a good finish to it and look so incredible. It's going to probably blow us all away. So and it's interesting you brought up about the writers' strike. Obviously, that's been going on now for uh, almost 2 months, I think, at this point. And yeah, it started in May 2nd,
Oh boy.
and it's really interesting when you consider the films that have been affected by it, the delays that Disney have announced. Avatar's an interesting one because I know that they've already filmed I think they might have filmed all of Avatar 3 and are just doing reshoots.
Yeah, they said they had finished the 3rd film. Yeah, as you said, they're doing, like, a couple of reshoots, maybe, like, this summer, I think, or
Mhm.
it's maybe, like, closer to winter, I can't remember, but someone in the cast said that they had to go back to do reshoots for,
Yeah,
a
I
quick
think it
bit.
was Zoe Saldana mentioned it, maybe at the Oscars or something, but they're doing reshoots this summer. So
Yeah.
they could honestly be doing reshoots any minute now.
Yeah, for all we know, Cameron's probably, yelling his ass off with the microphone, saying like, no, go dive her into the water. No, bury yourself in the water, suffocate." I shouldn't be saying that, especially with what's been going on in the world news. But anyways, moving on with that.
But yeah, it's so I think it's interesting to look at the other films that have been announced. Interestingly enough, there's been a couple films that got pushed forward. One of which is Deadpool 3. That's the movie that's coming out next May, May 2024. How are you feeling about Deadpool 3 getting moved up in the schedule? So it's been moved up to May from I think July or August originally.
I'm more worried about who's behind the scenes on that because I'm pulling up the thing right now. I should have had this prepared. Uh, Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Deadpool 3. Not that again, I'm not really worried about the release date being pushed up, but then again, well, anyways. It's just more of who's behind the camera because I'm Sean Levy's directing it. I'm not really a huge fan of his work. I hear he was it the Stranger Things show is really good. I just haven't bothered watching it yet. Um and yeah, I don't know. We'll see how that turns out. Because the one lesson I did learn the hard way was even though you have the writers of the first two Deadpools working with Ryan Reynolds once again, you could get another like Six Underground situation where it doesn't matter who's in charge of the writing stuff, it's still gonna suck.
I definitely have some concerns, especially with based on like when it's been filmed, because they're in production for it at the minute, I believe.
Yeah.
And obviously, with the fact that the riot strike's going on, from what I understand, Ryan Reynolds is not allowed to improvise on set because it
Right.
will go against the writer strike. And a similar situation occurred when X Men Origins Wolverine was made, which was obviously the
Oh,
last time Hugh
oh
Jackman and Ryan Reynolds got to pair up in an X Men movie. So if it's as
no.
good as that one, we're in for a great time next year.
At least it'll be a so bad it's funny kind of movie, maybe. But I don't know if you could even say that. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I'm just crossing my fingers. I'm hoping it's good. Um, yeah, yeah.
So I'll go through the list of the rest of the. So there was a bunch of Marvel movies, Disney and Star Wars movies, which were moved back and or given release date entirely. So the next on the list was Captain America: Brave New World, which is now going to be released in July 2024. Any strong thoughts on that one currently?
Um, pretty dumb title. I'm not
I mean,
really a fan of the.
I'll be honest, it's improved the title.
Really.
I prefer it over the other one. Was it New World
Uh,
Order?
New World Order. I mean, yeah, it was generic, but it wasn't, like, so stupid like this one
Uh,
was, in my opinion, but I don't know. I will say we should also point out real quick that in case you haven't already in the past, on the show, Harrison Ford has replaced, William Hurt, due to William Hurt passing away from, I believe, some type of cancer. Um, so it's interesting that they decided to go with Harrison Ford as their go-to guy to play Colonel was it General Ross, I should say. And I assume Harrison Ford, he'll probably have like a fun publicity tour, being asked all these like comic book questions. And he's like, "What's a Red Hulk?" You know, it's just like I'm only doing it for a paycheck, okay?
Yeah, Harrison Ford does not care about this movie at all. He saw a big old paycheck slide across the desk and was like, "Yep, sure, I'll do whatever. Just give me the money and I'll walk away from it
Yeah, and
afterwards."
with how many good movies he's been in, like the Indiana Jones movies, the Star Wars films, the two Blade Runner films, like I think he's earned the point where he's just like, you're fine. Just so long as you're not slumming it in your performance. You could, just half-ass these interviews and be like, Oh, yeah, it was a great movie, I guess. Yeah.
This is the thing, as a lot of the time I've been watching a lot of the ones for the new Dial of Destiny film, and I quite enjoy seeing his little interviews when he's paired up with someone else, so, like, him and Phoebe Waller-Bridge been good. Um, but yeah, you can really tell that he just does not enjoy doing these press junkets.
No.
Up
He's only
next,
doing it for the money, not for
yeah,
love.
exactly. Up next, replacing what was going to be Avatar's original slot, December next year, is the Thunderbolts movie. Which I'm going to be honest, I have absolutely zero interest in at this point. It's the group of the Avengers that I don't really care about, sadly.
Yeah, I'm yeah, I'm starting well, I'm slowly well, actually, I'm probably at that point where I'm just like, I don't really care anymore about the MCU just because, like, I like my brother said earlier, it's just like they had a perfect opportunity to end the franchise with, Endgame. And then if they wanna do more movies to sort of, end the main series and do, like, a soft reboot or whatever, fine, whatever. But these iteration of characters, we've now reached a point where it's like, okay, you've gone past your point, especially when you have, like I said, William Hurt passed away. But also you had the great Chadwick Boseman, who's no longer with us, who died a couple of years ago from colon cancer. And majority of your actors, like Robert Downey Jr. and I think Chris Evans, they're no longer starring in these movies. They're off doing something else. Like Robert Downey Jr. is working with Chris Nolan on the new Oppenheimer film, and Jeremy Renner, I think he's no longer in the MCU anymore after Hawkeye and what happened with his injury with the snow incident. Yeah, it's very much is a case of like, yeah, we're kind of done, guys. Come on, let's go. Let's wrap this up. And I don't know. I just yeah, like you. I'm not really that passionate anymore about the franchise. And honestly, I thought something like Guardians 3 or Spider-Man No Way Home was like a really good like set of like epilogue movies of like, okay, that's good.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of these, yeah, like a lot of the best ones that have come out lately have been this sort of like, oh, we're just wrapping up these characters' story arcs and we're gonna tuck them away, and you can just be like, they've had a happy ending. And sadly, a lot of these other ones now, so like the Thunderbolts, I, I'm gonna struggle to name most of the people who are even in the team. I know there is Florence Pugh's character, is it Yelena?
Yelena
Um,
Belova.
yeah, I know it's oh god, I'm gonna say the wrong name. Is it Red Guardian?
Yeah, Red Guardians in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest. I'm assuming Bucky Barnes is in this,
Yep.
but that's about it for who I know is definitely in this group.
I think they have Ghost. Okay, yeah, they have Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp, if you remember that
Oh
movie.
yeah, yeah.
Wyatt Russell's back from was it
Oh
Falcon and
he,
Winter
oh
Soldier.
bad Captain America.
Yeah, the bad guy. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is back. Uh Olga what was it? Taskmaster from the Black Widow prequel, she's back too. Um yeah, it's just and I think Harrison Ford's back in this one too, but
Man,
um
this is like not even a B team at this point. This
yeah.
this is like a D team.
Yeah, because I
It's
at least the Guardians are, like, the B team, if anything.
Yeah, but they're yeah, and they've got their own adventure, and it's the same core of people each time. So I've grown to love them guys. You know,
Yeah.
this means nothing to me.
Yeah, I just yeah. I got nothing else to say about this.
No, exactly. Moving on to the exciting year of 2025. In February, we are going to be well. Supposedly, we're going to be having Blade, the most delayed Marvel movie I've ever heard of, because
Yeah.
it's been delayed about 5 times now. I think. I'm still not convinced there's ever going to be a Blade movie at this point.
Yeah, it's sad too, especially when because I haven't seen the rest of the Wesley Snipes Blade movies, but I remember the first one was decent for what it was. And then it was great to hear back in 2019, I think it was, after Mahershala Ali won his second Oscar for Green Book. I think he went to the Marvel Studios and called up Kevin Feige or whatever, and he was just like, "I want to. I'm coming here to, sort of say like, "I wanna be a part of the MCU, but I got one idea." And he goes, "What's that?" "Blade." And now it's just to a point where it's like, "Okay, when's it coming out?" You know? I don't know if they're even gonna make it a rated R, either because I know Deadpool 3 is gonna be rated R because it's kind of its own thing, but, they said they're gonna have some ties within the MCU, and Kevin Feige's co-producing that with Ryan Reynolds and Sean Levy, I think. Um, but yeah, I don't know what Blade is gonna be. Are they gonna just neuter it down to a PG-13 or are they just gonna make it like a hard R or something, like the Wesley Snipes films were?
Yeah, it's hard to say, and because there's so many production delays, we just basically have no information on this. Like, I've heard this script has been scrapped and rewritten about 3 times already.
Yep.
It's changed director at least twice, and I'm honestly shocked that it was only 2019. It feels like it was further longer ago that he got announced as
Yeah.
as Blade. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be like 6 years by that point between him being announced to be play Blade and the actual movie coming out, and that's an alarmingly long amount of time.
Yeah, at that point, it's almost like, okay, you're either okay, you give this one more chance or you're pulling the plug.
Yeah. Up next is the Fantastic Four, which is going to be premiering in May of 2025. How are we feeling about seeing a third, or if you're going to count the really weird 90s one, fourth iteration of Fantastic Four?
Well, actually, this would be the 5th one,
Is it fifth?
altogether because we got was it the, Cormac Mc what not Cormac McCarthy, oh god, what was the guy's name?
I was going to say it's definitely not.
The unreleased, Fantastic Four movie, the Roger Corman, was it? I think that's what it was. And then you had the 2 Tim Story ones with Jessica Alba and Chris
Mhm.
Evans in it, and then you had the god awful shitty Josh Trank one.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic.
yeah, so I mean, hopefully it's better than those were, because the Fantastic Four movies, let's be honest, they've always been shit. Like, if
I
anything,
mean,
if anything, the Fan Four Stick films from that film for me made me think like, wow, I never realized how much I missed the Tim Story ones, that they weren't good to begin with.
yeah, that was the thing I took away most from it was that, man, I really enjoyed the really like camp version of the Fantastic Four from the early noughties.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Do you reckon they, because there's so many rumors going around about who's in this cast as well for who's going to play who? Do you believe any of them, or is it going to just be like a total surprise by the time we get it?
I'm just gonna wait and see what happens because I'm not even, I'm not into like that deep into like nerd culture to where I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm gonna make my own fan, fan casting unless if it's something like The Last of Us.
Yeah,
And that was only because I was so invested in that game and But I don't know. I'm just gonna wait and see what happens with uh the Fantastic Four. I Yeah. The one thing I am kind of curious about with whenever they get around to it is are they going to do a whole like CG thing like they did for Fan Four Stick, or are they going to go for the more practical elements of the Tim Story one? And I just realized I kind of answered my own question because we're now living in an era where it's like heavily reliant on CG effects and not a whole lot of practical effects going on, which is a shame.
yeah, I cannot see them. The thing is 100% just going to be some CGI thing walking around. They dare not try to do a practical. I don't think.
They'll get the rock from Everything Everywhere All at Once. There, that's our thing.
Perfect. There you go. There you go. You know what? Coming on to that, you mentioned The Rock, which is perfect because up next
Ugh.
in June 2025, Dwayne The Rock Johnson is back. It's Moana live action. Let's not do this, guys. We don't need this. I'm really sorry. I know Dwayne's really looking for a win right now. I love
Well,
Dwayne. I really want the best for him, but he just needs to choose better things to do at the minute. And Moana live action is not the answer.
I was also gonna say spoilers for Fast 10. He's apparently gonna be in the new Fast and Furious film, as well, but that main series of films is probably gonna be, capping off pretty soon. I've never seen the original Moana, so I have no idea how good it was or if everyone's full of shit. And, I just like, wow, I really didn't care for it like I did with other like Disney animated and Pixar films recently. Like, didn't care for Soul and didn't care for some of these other ones that came out. Like, what was another one? Encanto was very bland and forgettable. And yeah, so I can't even really comment too much on Moana other than like, okay, that's happening. Um, I just hope we don't reach to a point where, and I think unfortunately we might, where they're just going to reboot their Pixar properties. Like the Toy Story characters are going to be like live action dolls, and they're going to be like Uncanny Valley nightmares, like the Polar Express characters.
God, yeah. And also they're just gonna run out of films that they can live action at this point. I know Pixar ones are like the obvious next step, but half of them don't work because there's no human characters. But then they did it with the Lion King, so we'll see.
Fuck
We
you,
will see.
Disney.
No, look, I think Disney can still do good stuff, but
I,
they need to really refocus at the minute.
they need to stop doing these shitty live action remakes and just piss off. Just do
Go
something
back
else.
go back to the original ideas. I think there's still, you know, when they do bring out an original one, it does at least have something special about it. It does have the odd old Disney spark to it at
Yeah.
times.
It's just the problem is though is that a lot of studios like Lionsgate, for example, they were willing to risk like I don't know how much money it was they did making that new Hellboy movie, but they were willing to risk an already, well-known IP like Hellboy and try to turn that into a profit instead of doing something original and creative like the John Wick movies have been.
Hmm.
Um so I don't know. Yeah. I just yeah, I just hope that someone could come to their senses. I I thought someone could come to their senses, I should say, and say we got to stop doing these, Disney live action remakes until when The Lion King made $1 billion. It was like, okay, it's just never going to stop, and people are going to keep going to these, and because we've now reached the point where it's like, all right, hit the button, and hit on was it the just print out all the carbon copy bullshit films. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
because
putting
you
a
got
real I'm putting a real dower on this episode, aren't I?
oh no, look, this is we got to talk about the state of like how Disney's lineup's looking. You know, that's the whole idea of this,
Yeah,
and also to like consider what is Avatar going to be up against in the future, basically. And I
yeah.
feel like with these gaps, God, the 4 year gap between 3 and 4 for Avatars is going to feel very long if this is the sort of films we're going to get in between. Bringing that up, let's talk about how we're getting two more Avengers films. We're getting one in May 2026 called The Kang Dynasty, which is 100% probably going to get renamed or recast. And
Yep.
then we're going to get Avengers Secret War exactly 1 year later. Not like they've done that setup before where they have two Avenger films 1 year apart exactly for any particular reason. Yeah, how are we feeling about these two Avengers films? Is there got to be any excitement for them by that point?
I don't know. I would assume that that's where they're going to end it, but I don't know. It just seems like Disney is just throwing too much money at this to where it's like DC has been, where it's just like we got to keep throwing money, and it doesn't matter if these films keep bombing or underperforming. We just got to keep throwing money at them. Although Guardians 3 did pretty well financially, but
Yeah.
part of it was because James Gunn got what he wanted and finally did his like capper to his trilogy, and fans wanted to actually go out and see it, and there's like a word of mouth going around. And yeah, I don't know. I just we'll see. I as for the whole Kang situation, I can't comment on it too much because the trial's still going on and we
Yes.
really
Early
can't
days.
say too
Early
much.
days.
But all I will say is that yeah, if what they say it is true about who, then oh boy, we're in trouble.
Yeah, it's a rough situation to be in to 2 weeks before incidents come to light. You make a movie where there is just endless of that people to say this is what your main heroes are going to be facing for the rest of the next two 2 to 3 years.
Well, and on
Um,
top of that, he had a movie that's coming out. Oh, I don't know. We'll see what happens as of this recording, but he was supposed to have a movie coming out later this winter season, I think, called Magazine Dreams, which was supposed to be like his quote unquote like Oscar contender type of movie, and and he would have competed against some of these, actors where we may or may not be seeing in awards races, like Leonardo DiCaprio for Killers of the Flower Moon, or possibly Bradley Cooper for Maestro, and now it's just like they might just dump it on Hulu or wherever and just do it that way. But
It's such a it's a hard situation, and obviously way too early days to be talking about.
oh, of course, no, I totally agree.
But the worst thing is, you guys keep putting dates down for these movies, and you're gonna have to keep moving them if things happen. So it's a
Or
little
just
bit of
cancel them
your own
altogether.
fault. Yeah, this is it. Like, or you're gonna have to just figure out a different villain. I don't know. Get
Yeah.
who's that one who eats planets? Get him. I don't know. Literally my Marvel knowledge is so
Was it
little.
Galactus?
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's
Okay,
Galactus, but also
I could be wrong.
We might have had a Galactus at this point. I'm not even sure. Moving away from Marvel films, we finally got some announcements for Star Wars coming back to the cinema. Woo! Maybe we're getting two Star Wars films in 2026 and one in 2027. Do you reckon we will get these Star Wars films because they seem to want to keep putting them off?
I think eventually down the road we'll get a Star Wars film. I if they want to do them as like their own, standalone films, that's fine. I just hope that they don't go the route of never doing like another trilogy again. And someone, I think it was on Sardonicast. It was back when Solo was coming out, and I think it was Alex from I Hate Everything said, it's his own podcast channel. I think he said something along the lines of like, if he were an executive at Lucasfilm, and what he would have done was he would have, held off for like a good decade or so, right? And then, really release them as like do another set of trilogies, or films, I should say, as a trilogy, and then release in like a couple of years, like Lucas did with the prequels. That way it gives you a little bit more time to sort of think creatively and think about the story and think about the characters. Because I think we've been on a little bit too much of Star Wars overload for a while.
I mean, maybe
And
Overlord as well, to be honest.
yeah, with how Disney's been running the company like an empire. And yeah, we'll see. I just
It's an interesting one because I miss Star Wars being like an event. I remember when The Force Awakens was coming out and the excitement of it, of being
oh
like,
yeah.
Star Wars is back. This is, I that was the first time I went to like a midnight screening. Incredible experience. It felt so good. And I just don't see myself being that excited for them at the minute. If they do come back to the cinema, I think it's a little bit of maybe a bit of oversaturation from the Disney Plus shows and them being sort of very mixed in quality. And yeah, it's just a weird place for Star Wars to be in at the minute.
Hmm.
Now, one thing I did want to ask you about is, do you think that this writer's strike that's been going on is going to affect these films anymore? Do you reckon we'll see some more delays going on?
Yep. I do. I think, it's very funny that the executives at Hollywood or whoever, with these studio heads, they think to themselves, we're not even gonna, we'll keep pushing for this AI technology, and push for the writers to out of their rooms to where we rely on AI and shit like that. And it's like, you guys realize that AI can only do so much. Like, you can't rely on AI to do these like animation styles or whatever, or have them do these like, like it's just gonna give you like an assembly line screenplay. Whereas like an actual writer would come in and do something thoughtful and creative, or something kind of interesting, or have its own little twist. Like you wouldn't get your Aaron Sorkins, your Quentin Tarantino's, or even I mentioned this on another podcast. I'll mention this again. Have you ever heard of a movie called Running Scared?
I recognize the name.
It's from 2006. It's directed and written by a guy named Wayne Kramer, the guy who did The Cooler. Got Alec Baldwin a nomination from the Oscars, and it's this like really like dark and kind of interesting film that was it starred Paul Walker, Cameron Bright, Vera Farmiga, and Chaz Palminteri, and it involved a low risking mafioso who's in charge of getting rid of a gun that killed crooked cops. And he finds himself in a race against time when the murder weapon falls into the wrong hands, and so Paul Walker has to go out of his way to go after these, whoever has the gun and try to get it back before the cops come in and before his boss comes in, because he's working for a mob. And something like that wouldn't be made with AI, computers. But it was an interesting movie because it's not just your like dark demented kind of movie, but it was a throwback to the 70s, hard R, crime thrill films like Death Wish, the original Death Wish, and it also added this like fairy tale element to it. So like it's sort of you have these like visual metaphors throughout the film. So like the main character played by Paul Walker, his character, he's like the big bad wolf of sorts. They come across these like these two a married couple who's like a reverse Hansel and Gretel. I won't go too much into that. And there's a bunch of other characters like they come across like a pimp dressed in white who's like the Mad Hatter of the world. And this kid who, accidentally who steals the gun and uses it for his own advantage and runs away with it. He's like Pinocchio who wants like a real family and not this abusive household he has. Um, and again, it's a really dark and kind of disturbing movie, but it's one that I always come back to, not just for Paul Walker, giving a really solid performance of the film, but just because again, like the way that Wayne Kramer put that together, it's just something that you would never get from a computer creating that. It would just come up with this like algorithm of like your next Hunger Games movie or your next Saw movie or whatever, or even the other like intellectual properties. Like it would probably do another Free Guy movie like nothing. And yeah, and it just sucks that we're not going to be getting more of these like creative things going around because either the studio is going to make sure that to go out of the way to make sure that it's not greenlit and that you don't see it, but also even when it does show up in theaters, like I remember The Nice Guys came out a couple years ago. If you have you seen that
Oh,
yet or no?
I adore The Nice Guys. One of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah, and it's a fun, like, Shane Black, dark comedy with Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling, interacting off each other like, it's a throwback to, like, the Lethal Weapon days, and it flopped at the box office, like, no one went to go see it, and I'm like, "Guys, this fucking sucks." Like, I wanna see more shit like this. Again, something creative and fun, and again, it's just, whenever I hear a studio, like I said earlier on the podcast, it sucks when studios are willing to risk, like $100 million easily to market and produce something like a Hellboy movie when it's like destined to fail because you don't have a talented voice like Guillermo del Toro coming back to do it. And you're just like, who gives a shit? We want to just get in. We want our money now, and we want to get in on the Deadpool hard R funny, goofy kind of movie, even though Hellboy as a property has never been that way at all, even in the comics, I'm pretty sure. So it's just sad to hear that, even with Disney, it's just like, who gives a shit about creative content?
Yeah, it's a rough time, and I'm glad these riots or strikes are going on. And from what I understand as well, this June 30th is when, if nothing's been agreed, the Actors Guild will be joining the strike as well, which I think is when things go real bad for the Hollywood producers because they'll really not be able to make anything, and all these films which have already had movie dates announced will have them pushed back at least another year.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I really hope the writers are able to work out what will get the deal they want to.
We support you writers.
Yeah, we support writers. We are truly anti AI in our arts in any form. Basically, don't do it. Just
Yeah.
I like hearing human stories, especially ones involving planets far away and giant whales that cut off people's arms.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I want more of that shit, please.
Yeah, more of that. I do have one final question for you is do you believe Avatar 4 and 5 will be delayed further?
Yeah, with the way things are probably going, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, but yeah, no, like I said before, if they and if part of the reason why they're delayed is to get the visual effects better, okay, cool, I'm fine with it.
You know what? I put full faith in Cameron and the team. They have proven that time is worth the wait, and yeah, if they could take as long as they want, I will still be there opening day regardless.
And the other thing too about Cameron, I haven't said this. The one thing I did want to say about Cameron though is that he hasn't lost his shit entirely. Like he hasn't become like the George Lucas or Francis Coppola, where it's like, oh, okay, you're now in a position where you've lost what made you so great to begin with, or you just got lucky with your first, that first Star Wars film, and you realized, okay, this is too much work. I'm giving this to someone else like Irvin Kushner and Richard Marquand, I think it was, for the
Mm.
Star Wars sequels. Um, but yeah, no, at the same time, I personally think someone like George Miller is even more impressive to me because look at what he's done. He didn't do a live action movie in over a decade or so, and then he comes out with Mad Max Fury Road, and it's like fucking awesome, Um, so yeah, no, I like you said, I trust Cameron enough, and yeah, hopefully these Avatar sequels are just as good, if not just a little bit better as they get along, like the Fast and Furious films or Mission Impossible films have been.
Yeah, and honestly, it's been such a great talk about this. I've really enjoyed it, despite the fact we're talking about Avatar being delayed, and I've now have to figure out another year's worth of content to talk about. Um, yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2.5 years. I have to wait now till the
Yeah.
next one. The 4 year gap between 3 and 4 is going to be the hardest part, I believe. That's going to be a killer. But yeah, it's a fun time. We've had other news recently. Frontiers of Pandora for the PlayStation and Xbox is going to be released in this December. So there are still things to be excited about if you are an Avatar fan. So yeah, thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us. Is there anything you would like to promote?
Yes, I would like to promote. Obviously, one of the shows that I'm on is the Real Steel podcast. I'm on with David Steele, with a couple of episodes that we got planned. We're going to be doing a bit more of the spoiler cast as the summer goes on. I might be on there for Mission Impossible. We'll see. But there's other stuff that him and I had planned together. Uh, uh, that we're gonna get through as this upcoming Oscar season goes on, and yeah, so that's all I will say about that because I don't want to give away too much regarding with that. Um, and as far as where you could follow me, you can go to my link tree on my account, which is under at Matthew995. It's all lowercase. On there, you can find my Twitter account, my Letterbox account, where you could see all of my social media rants or film rants that I'm putting on Letterbox, and you could agree and disagree with me on said film. I also have an Instagram account you can follow me on, a TikTok account, which I just started a couple months ago. And like I said, you could follow, anyone out there who wants to listen to any of the episodes I've been on besides this one. I also have on there a link to my Spotify, all the audio content forms via Spotify and on YouTube as well for any of the video podcasting I've been on. And while you're at it, check out some of my work. I've done some work for Stevenson University during my major in film and moving image. I did a couple of shorts that I'm very proud of, and also got a chance to review some stuff for other websites and channels.
And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Matthew. And thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And I will speak to you all again soon. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. This episode is dedicated to our patrons Eric Scrock, Patrick Regal, and Lauren King. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/avatarpod.